as a developer from adding things down the road, but generally, when putting together just this video game, which he clearly has an idea and scope of, obviously Thor, there's going to be inefficiencies in code bases. But one of the code bases that we're looking at over here is this falling particle. Now, there's a lot of numbers that are being dropped in here, and one of the things that you'll tend to see in Pirate Software's code is magic number abuse. Now, magic number abuse is effectively, for anybody that doesn't know, magic numbers are arbitrary values that people put into videos, or people put into code, sorry, where the value isn't properly defined. So again, it's just numbers you're putting in, and the reason why it's so bad is as simple as this. Imagine if you're writing a bit of code, right? You write code, and then you stop developing that code for a week or two, and now you come back. Now, would you remember exactly every single variable or entry that you put in, or what every single number means, right? Generally speaking, you have to be pretty descriptive with your code, or at least you have to write it in a way where it's almost like, even if you're a solo dev, imagine you're working in a team all the time. Simply because if no other developer can come in and look at your code and figure out immediately right off the bat what things are, that's an issue. That's a problem. Now, going through obviously some more of his code, when he brings up this, for instance, right, in this node, the object scroll Sheldon Talker events. Now, some of the stuff that people also brought up in his code, and also Coding Jesus did too, was the amount of commenting that goes on. And this is what I'm talking about with readable code, right? Again, if you have readable code, you really don't need to have a metric shit ton of comments. Generally speaking, I have only used comments to this extreme degree when I was in high school. Or, just literally just in high school. I remember in high school we had this dog shit training language. It wasn't Pascal, but it started with a P. And if somebody could help me remember it, that would be amazing. But, we did that for one semester. And then, the next semester we moved on to C++. Now, in both those semesters in high school, my teacher taught me the entirety of commenting simply because we had to do it just to know how to do commenting in the future. But the other thing that came out was obviously having readable code. Now, the thing is, if you have readable code, you don't need to put a comment in between every single if-else line, or just any line in general. Where I think, realistically, the biggest nightmare for a lot of people when it comes to looking at Thor's code is global storyline array. Now, global storyline array, from my understanding, is effectively the way the game tracks states, and it tracks, what each decision is made throughout the course of a game. Now, this is where it gets really wild, okay? Obviously, if you're looking at this as a programmer, you might be in a bit of you might have your mind blown a little bit. Imagine having to constantly control F and look back on this entire array every single time you want to make a reference or a change, right? And of course, what he's done is he's sort of commented on the right what these things associate to. So for instance, gym, void, closet, middle, these are obviously locations. Could be a little bit more descriptive, but I guess they work in the context of the development. And then of course the actual event, which is in this case whistled at PPP. Whoa buddy, talked at bench presses, told the truth, enter void, Joe's sunglasses, Joe's computer checked. And to the right of it, it's a state number, so 0, 1, and 2, which would be reflected in the code right here. And then of course, not yet, truth, and so on and so forth, which would be an explanation for what these numbers mean. Now, the way that it blows my mind is, imagine if down the road in the code you miswrote one number for another by mistake. It can happen. The other thing is, obviously, this is built into the game. And one of the things I heard Coding Jesus and a whole bunch of other people mention was that you could use something like a YAML or an XML. But this is where I wanted to provide some of the context, because I think that the version of GameMaker that Thor is using to develop this game, that version, I think at the time, didn't support any form of parsing or JSON parsing or anything of that nature. So I guess his method had to be coded in. Now, could he change this down the road? Sure. And to give you context, right? Again, you don't want this coded in to the game. You want it referring to JSONs, YAMLs, XMLs, any of that nature. You want it outside the game simply because this just wastes development time, from my understanding. Just obviously, you got to build the game, especially when you hard code these things in. I don't think that Jason is some expert coder, and that's totally fine. Nobody has to be John Carmack. Not every single game developer is fucking John Carmack. Not every single, security researcher is a complete expert. I think the best kind of coders that I've ever seen are the ones that understand human limitations and are just good at picking up great concepts. The thing about what I've seen over here is, magic numbers abuse aside, this global storyline array always hits me as just bad coding practice. And the thing is, a lot of this leads to what we call tech debt. So the more tech debt you acquire, meaning that, the more bad practices you make in the beginning, all snowball down the road and makes it so that, down the road when you're fixing up your game, when you're bug fixing, when you're tracing an error, when you're tracing something, that is going wrong in one function, you are wasting so much time because your code is so poorly written that, something that could probably take you...
That's developers, though.
30 minutes, maybe an hour to fix, may actually take you days to fix. Maybe it's something that is so confusing that you probably don't want to go all the way back and fix things. And for Jason's sake, it's not so much a situation where he can just, I guess, maybe gut the code and redo it from the beginning. It really is just a bad practice that has manifested itself into what we're seeing over here. Now, Coding Jesus even brought in a game maker developer who showcased a performant lighting engine versus the version that, Jason had in his game. Now, of course, this version, this 2D ray casting that he had, was apparently so imperformant that it was doing tens of thousands of checks. And again, a lot of this was being done on the CPU, which, if you've ever noticed how this stuff is done, there's a reason why we have graphic processing units, which would calculate a lot of this stuff in parallel, calculations. Not something that you would really want to put onto the CPU. But again, in this case, I want to talk a little bit about context. Obviously, the engine that, Pirate Software is using, Game Maker, and the resolution he's running the game on functionally really makes it so that, again, I was playing this on a handheld Steam Deck, the demo at least, and on my main computer. And for the most part, it actually runs pretty well at 60 frames per second. So even if his code is inefficient, for instance, it's still functional enough to do the job that it was set out to do. A lot of the stuff that people have been brought up and scrutinized him for is making imperformant code, which is totally a valid concern. And it's totally valid to call out somebody that claims to have decades of experience for basically writing code as if, he was in high school or, very, very first year college, if that even, or, not even working professionally. Working professionally, anyone would have picked up and yelled at you for how poorly some of this code was written initially. He kind of writes these video games, and the best way to kind of say it is he writes it like a true, honest indie developer, somebody who's first time developing a video game, somebody who may not even have programming knowledge. And this is where, obviously, if you really want to look at bad code, there's a lot of really popular games that are written in a dogshit manner. Games like Undertale, for instance.
Yeah.
Toby Fox apparently famously has probably one of the longest switch statements when it comes to the dialogue. I believe the whole game's fucking dialogue is an entire switch statement. It's just spaghetti code. But nowhere has Toby Fox claimed to work for 2 decades, in the world of red team hacking at Blizzard, so on and so forth. That's just somebody that is very upfront and honest. They're not a programmer. They're just somebody that wanted to make a video game, and they made one of the best games of all time. From what I understand, even games like Celeste, one of the best platformers in the world, actually tends to have, I believe, like a 5,000 long class file just with its movement. So again, no game developer in this space, especially an indie game developer, is perfect. And if we're going to be judging somebody for bad code, there's a lot of indie games with bad code. Hell, for crying out loud, if fucking Bethesda can release games like Fallout 3
or Oblivion Remastered,
even Skyrim, especially on the goddamn PlayStation 3, and charge money for that, that's a big AAA company releasing dog shit code at times, heavily relying on the community to fix it. Again, a lot of the anger comes to Pirate Software because of his ego. Because even if you call him out on this stuff, he'll always have some bullshit answer to hit you back with. For instance, even going to the lighting engine that was mentioned over here, Pirate Software goes out and gives one of the most nonsense responses. So obviously he says, I chose to do pixel by pixel CPU based lighting over using a shader to ensure the system was compatible with machines that could not compile shaders. This was helpful for a number of regions, such as Brazil, where the game has been...
Look at that. So apparently, if you open the cell phone in Grand Theft Auto 5, it doesn't ever log you out. Look at that. Hi, Kitty.
Hey,
I love you.
Man, it's got strong potential, you know, strong potential. Check it out.
Shut up, you. Strong potential. Strong potential. And I can just sit in the phone and it never logs you out. I can't believe that. So I learned something that I can make a video about and make money with. But see, that would take me away from doing the MMO lifestyle. But flipping cars for fun. Yep. Oh, Kitty, you're bumping my you're bumping my camera. Hello, Kitty. Yeah, you want to hear some purring? Sorry. I'm gonna play some Fortnite. Wait, what? Wait, what? I'm trying to hit escape. You're not letting me. Oh no. Just exit then. You're like glitched or something, yeah? Just exit. It's fine. Oh, sorry guys. Oh. Nice, my core reconnected. Yep.
very popular. And this is where it's so difficult to even defend, because it's a simple way of him saying, yeah, the code's just not efficient. Even when there's another game maker developer, you know, in that Coding Jesus video that came out and basically provided a better, more performant option. Maybe he wrote this as a way that he thought in his head, this is how you do it, okay? You know, when I was like, again, I keep going back to like high school, even college, and sometimes you do something because in your mind, that's how you write code. And then, of course, some senior comes by and says, yeah, you could have done this in a much more efficient way. It's one of the reasons why your program is probably consuming more resources than you could imagine, right? Yes, in this case, for his Heartbound, this lighting engine may have been functional because of a low resolution overall, but nothing, you know, stops you from making more efficient code down the road. And you could say, yes, for Jason's game, it's probably good enough. But the thing is, people look at it, you know, from a perspective of him being this, you know, good coder that I guess has sort of been sort of passed on as, people look into his past and they're like, all right, somebody with this much experience should know how to do this thing better. And again, he could literally just say, yeah, it's wrong, but instead he comes with this long diatribe, talks about CPU rendering, and the whole thing about resilience, right, being like assisted because he's using this software solution to prevent, I believe, the shader calculations happening. As if people all over the world, even in the more poor countries, have access to even the weakest GPUs that are DirectX 11 capable, even basic GPUs with shader calculation. From my understanding, even the engine he's using, Game Maker, requires a hardware accelerated GPU setup, whether that be integrated or whether that be not. The concept of shader calculation would just be a required thing anyways, whether or not you're using it. So he could come with more performant options, he could come with more performant code, but this is just him again, not simply saying, yeah, I made a little oopsie, maybe it's not as good as it should be, but all you could even just say is it doesn't have to be as good, it just works for my project, and it works on every system. That's really the best answer you can give. The lighting, when used correctly, increases CPU usage over baseline a negligible amount. When run on both a smart fridge, which it doesn't, he's referring to a video that somebody made where they apparently ported his game to a smart fridge, even though he's not even being truthful about it. They just casted the games over to a smart fridge using something known as smart. So it's kind of like saying, hey man, this Apple TV of mine can run Cyberpunk 2077 with full path tracing enabled. Also, the caveat, the game is being streamed from an RTX 4090 enabled computer. Yeah, no shit, the smart fridge can run a casted video. Come on now. What they did is like driving a manual, not knowing how to use a clutch, and then blaming the car.
Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about, Tyler. What do you mean manual car? That announcement doesn't even make any sense.
I don't know how this fucking relates to coding whatsoever. I don't know what he was trying to go with here. I'm still trying to process the statement, but it is what it is. And then he says, for context, all this was written in Game Maker Studio 1.4 back in 2018. A massive number of modern features in Game Maker did not exist then. Updating this now would give trivial benefits to performance without any gameplay improvements. The framework is functional, performant, and shipped. And that's where I do tend to agree with Jason a little bit over here, because yes, he's got the scope of his game in mind. And if it works, right? That's kind of the goal in general. If we want to sit here and basically, call him out for being so bad in terms of coding, that's a whole different story. And in some cases it has merits. The guy has pretty much been showcasing his credentials like crazy. And if we're looking at it from a programming angle, the way that he's written this code is not reflective of a man with so much perceived credentials. So doing all this off decompiled code and proudly displaying it is dubious at best, which I guess is kind of true, but given some of the tools used to decompile, I don't think that there's such a massive difference in the code that he used as source and what was effectively decompiled. But again, I'll let the actual expert, in Game Maker correct me on that if you need to. So I've been releasing monthly updates for Heartbound, and all these can be seen in the Steam announcements on the game's page. So yeah, when he says this, it's kind of true, but let me show you the amount of effort that's been going on into this entire project. So for instance, Heartbound's Steam database right over here is quite honestly the most important part. So if we go to the patches on SteamDB, you can see that, yes, when the game was being developed in June, for instance, and then it was developed a bit in March, right? So for instance, in June in 2022, all the work effectively happened in the course of this, like, month. Then, of course, 2023 came around where you had one big patch in March, one patch in June, one patch in August. So yes, there was monthly work being done. And then, of course, September, and then October, and then with November skipped, he did do December. And of course, there was a couple months skipped in 2025. Actually, all of 2024 was effectively forgotten. 2025, March 2nd, he actually did patch the game. And I believe this was around the time when people started to kind of call it out on Reddit. So a patch was pushed out, then another patch in May, and then of course another patch in May again towards the end of the month, and then in July. So to say that every single month kind of gets a patch is not entirely true, I would say, but he has, I guess, been working on this game. You can open up these patch notes and see what he's been doing. You know, he'll add new content, he'll do bug fixes, so on and so forth. Now, it is kind of understood, I guess, by most people that it really seems like for him, most of the money is in streaming services. Most of the money is basically in this community that is growing up. And for other context's sake too, there was a period, again, like I said, where he almost did die apparently through COVID with his work. So if there is a gap in, I guess, updates, it most likely is just attributed to the fact that he was sick, he was going through personal stuff, and he is just a solo developer on this. So again, with somebody that has to juggle, again, a massive following on the internet, and of course, an entire indie game, I'm sure that, again, it's logical that he's probably going to favor what makes most of the money anyways. But that's still no excuse. You did charge money for this game, you still are charging money for this game, and again, you should finish this game. But I'll get back to that towards the tail end. You know, a lot of people compare his code with Yandere Simulator, but I think I'm going to go as far and say that maybe in this situation, what Yandere Simulator is definitely much more of an impressive game. Now, a lot of people have shit on Yandere's dev quite a fair bit for a lot of reasons. But when it comes to his code, you know, a lot of his code was laughed at because this is one of the things from 9 years ago. People looked at his crazy if-else statements, right? And of course, obviously, according to Yandere dev, he did switch this off to actual switch statements. Not that it necessarily makes it much better, but if it's one thing that I do appreciate a little bit more about Yandere dev's code is just looking at his code versus, you know, Thor's code. I would say that his code is more readable in the sense that I could look at this function and look at this set of code and understand just from reading everything about this, what it's about, what it's referring to, and what values it's going at. And while, yes, there are some levels of magic numbers, I would say that it's crazy to think that Yandere Dev has a little bit more readable code, in my opinion at least, than global storyline array yada 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 yada. Now, does that make Yandere Dev a better programmer? I don't know. Maybe not. But he's not a hard bar to fucking go past, okay? Let's be completely real here. But there's a big difference between, again, Yandere Dev and a big difference between Thor. Yandere Dev, I don't believe ever claimed to be this crazy super hacker or somebody that is a computer aficionado. And, you know, on the other hand, you've got Mr. Egotistical, who has 20 years of whatever goddamn experience, so on. So it's that reason alone that people have speculated, people have looked so hard into his code and audited so much of his life. Because again, it used to be that, I guess, programmers really weren't looking that too deep into it, but now it's like people are looking at these basic mistakes and making pretty reasonable conclusions that maybe this guy is the hottest, you know, fucking shit in the room. So there was a lot of people even looking into like things like his DRM, for instance, and this is where a lot of stuff tends to get into like really big misinformation territory. Now, again, with his stance on stock movies, and again, somebody that really doesn't seem like they care about game preservation, a a lot of people looked at his game Heartbound, and there was misinformation. Like, apparently his game was online only, which it wasn't. There was a lot of people spreading misinformation that apparently his game checked the Steam achievements and verified the game's validity through that, even though that was something that belonged in his prior game, Breakfast with Champions. Again, this Heartbound is entirely playable.
What?
The only thing that it does do is check for online and offline in Steam mode. In fact, it's actually quite easy to beat the DRM for something like Heartbound. And of course, there's repacks and plenty of people that have beaten it. There actually really isn't even a deterrent. There actually really isn't even a big DRM to this game. In fact, if anything, it might be one of the lightest deterrents that I've actually ever seen for a video game. Now look, at the end of all this, ladies and gentlemen, I think there's been a huge dogpile on, Thor. I think there has been, right? Simple as that. And I don't want to just be somebody that contributes to it for the sake of contributing to it.
You were the worst in the dog pile.
I really do feel like, at the end of all this all could have been avoided. Okay? All Pirate Software had to do was either use the fucking mana gem, okay? Or if you fucked up in World of Warcraft, instead of being the biggest douche in the fucking room and effectively being the person with the largest ego on all of planet Earth, I mean, we are talking crazy levels of ego, crazy levels of pompousness. If he had just simply learned to shut the fuck up and apologize, even if you don't mean it, just learn to take a little bit of an effort. Learn to laugh at yourself. None of this would have been an issue. The guy would have still been a beloved content creator, still would have been somebody that was pretty squeaky clean of any controversy. Instead, ego became the reason why he effectively is a lightning rod of controversy all over the internet. Everyone and their mother is taking a fucking shit down his throat. And again, it's hard to root for Pirate Software. It's hard to even be aligned with him because he makes it so easy to absolutely despise himself. He has the ego of somebody that apparently through his own code and through his own actions has not proven to be worthy of that ego, okay? This is not John Carmack we're talking about when it comes to developing video games. And while he, granted, has never admitted to that and he's never claimed to be the greatest programmer in the world, it's just somebody that has coasted on this 20 years of Blizzard experience, red team specialization, and when you look at how he codes a video game, it makes you really question everything you've ever gotten from it. Now again, to go further into Pirate Software, I think the best way for him to honestly come out of this is, again, learning when to shut the fuck up, learning to take an L. But one thing that I have learned in doing this whole video and researching everything here is that I really do think that he does genuinely care about this game, Heartbound. And I really think the best way to turn around this bad luck and this bad fucking controversy that he's gone through is just finish the game. I really do think that, if he puts his mind to it, with technical depth all the way provided here, he could still finish this game. It is definitely an uphill battle. I do think that looking over at his code and looking how he's done this game, I don't think that it's going to be an easy thing down the road. But he's got a game, he's got a scope, he knows what this game is supposed to be and what it's not. And for a solo developer, I still think that he can cross the finish line and make this RPG a true thing.
Chicago's O-Block is notorious for its high crime rates and low quality of life. And curiously, the block has acquired something of a media hype pop culture. On one hand, it's derided for its murders and gun crime, but on the other, it's cultivated famous rap artists like Chief Keef and King Von. Some people claim that these rappers exaggerate certain aspects of the neighborhood for their music, insisting that there are worse neighborhoods than O-Block on Chicago's south side. This opinion, however, should be taken with a grain of salt. Well, some neighborhoods might be worse than those in Parkway Garden Homes. It does not excuse the situation. Roaches and rodents roam the hallways of the buildings. Trash sits in a heap around the corner, and on top of it all, the occasionally, the streets ring with the sounds of bullets. So, what is the mystery behind this unique neighborhood's reputation? Join me to find out as today we discover the history of Chicago's O Block. I'm your host, Ryan Socash, and you're watching It's History. Our story begins with the segregated white city on Chicago's 63rd Street and South Parkway, now known as Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. Constructed in 1905, sometimes listed as the White City Amusement Park in print media, it should not be confused with another amusement park that was responsible for the World's Columbian Exposition in 1893. Built on 14 acres of land, it was one of the biggest amusement parks in the U.S. at the time of its opening. The ballroom in one of the buildings could fit 1,000 dancers, and a restaurant, a College Inn, could seat 2,500 diners. The park's signature White Tower could be seen from 15 miles away, earning White City the title, the City of a Million Electric Lights. There was no general admission ticket, but African Americans were, let's say, discouraged from attending. Names like the White Tower and White City carried a great significance for people who were not allowed inside. One of the park's games was called African Dip and involved white patrons hurling projectiles at a black person, an activity that sounds disgraceful at the least. However, segregation eased up once more black people moved to the area for lesser jobs like this one. The Great Depression took a toll on the project, and by 1933, the company that owned it could not pay taxes. In 1946, White City's facilities were auctioned off. The land was designated for large-scale, multi-family residential developments for African Americans. An ironic gesture, one has to say. And so it was. America's first cooperatively owned African American housing development opened in 1955. The low-income apartment complex would go on to house 20,000 residents. This place, known as the Parkway Garden Apartment Homes, nestled between Woodlawn and Washington Park, would ultimately become known as the O Block. Henry K. Holzman was the architect chosen to design the apartment. He had worked as a contractor in Chicago from 1891 to 1893 before becoming a partner in the firm Brainerd Holzman Architects from 1893 to 1897. After the markets crashed in 1929, his firm started designing affordable residential housing projects in Illinois. This opinion, however, should be taken with a grain of salt. He was involved in major housing projects over the next few years. By the latter 30s, was receiving funding from the Federal Housing Authority for designing his own projects. In 1932, he wrote a book, Rehabilitating Blighted Areas, Studies of Blighted Areas, How They Evolve, and Their Effect on Society, which was published by the Architects Club of Chicago. In 1945, he published 2 more works regarding urban homes and the idea of mutual ownership. In 1937, Moholy Nagy, the influential Hungarian artist, opened the new Bauhaus, American School of Design, Marshall Field's unused South Prairie Avenue mansion, also known as Fields Victoria. Holzman was the director of the Association of Arts and Industry and was heavily involved in bringing the Bauhaus sensibilities to Chicago. He worked on apartment complexes in the city's north, including the Winchester Hood and the Lunt Lake apartments, before moving to the Parkway Garden apartment homes, originally known as O'Donnell Homes. Holzman's firm went bankrupt from the project, and he was convicted for mail fraud. The O'Donnell Homes was among his final projects. Today, the Parkway Homes District, located in the grander Grand Crossing community, consists of 35 buildings, 11 of which have elevators. The Bauhaus approach is evident here, as Holzman focused on functionality, efficiency, and addressing the social needs of the residents. But let's refer to a moment to the landmark nomination for the apartment homes, which reads, quote, "The buildings are minimally decorated with early modernist features, including offset canted window bays, projecting cantilevered balconies at the open stairwells, corner ribbon windows, and streamlined concrete entrance canopies. The landscaping with the Parkway Garden Homes District is simple and functional. The symmetrical arrangement of buildings on the 15-acre site creates primary and secondary areas of outdoor space within the complex. The primary elevation of buildings generally front inwards towards informal courtyards or transitional spaces with open lawns framed by curved intersecting pedestrian pathways that connect to various areas throughout the complex. The African American communities in the city's south side actually ended up here during the Great Migration from the south. When southern states passed Jim Crow laws against African Americans, barring them from public facilities, discriminatory laws coupled with routine lynchings forced black communities to migrate north. Chicago was the most accessible city for people moving out of Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, and Arkansas. Before the Second World War, the African American wave comprised mostly of rural Southerners. Most of them have been laborers, but a few were landowners who were pushed out because of the boll weevil infestation. They took time to assimilate into Chicago's urban culture. In the 1940s, however, the arriving African Americans were mostly urban, slightly more skilled, consequently a tad more ambitious. As almost 3,000 African Americans arrived in Chicago every week, at one point in the 40s, the local inhabitants were worried for their jobs and the changing dynamics of the city. Even the older migrants knew that they could lose their jobs to younger workers. Most of the migrants settled in the south side due to the steel and meatpacking industries there, forming what most historians call the Black Belt. The belt stretched for 30 blocks along State Street on the south side and was around 7 blocks wide. The sudden influx meant that Jim Crow laws unfortunately found their way into the state as well. Black people had to contend with erratic, restrictive covenants, among other things. Even though the Supreme Court ruled that these covenants were unconstitutional, homeowner associations discouraged selling houses to black families. The Black Belt consisted of a few neighborhoods that were open to black families, so it quickly became overcrowded. Almost 3/4 of the city's black population lived here by the mid-20th century. A 1934 census estimates that the city's black households contained 6.8 people on average, in contrast to white households, which had 4.7. So the development of housing projects like the Parkway Garden Apartments was a measure taken to ease the overpopulation issue. However, it should be pointed out that the belt was not a homogeneous zone of African Americans. It was varied and diverse with poor and affluent neighborhoods, a quality still represented in the south side of Chicago. Anyhow, the circumstances in the majority of the belt called for solidarity. Communities encouraged and supported local businesses. Chicago African Americans had unprecedented access to city jobs and boasted seats in local and state government. Other clubs included Chicago Jazz and the Harlem Renaissance. The economic conditions dipped after the Great Depression, but was rising again after the Second World War. Between 1940 and 1960, the city's population grew from 278,000 to 813,000. Chicago was being referred to as, quote, the Black Capital of America, with prominent public figures like William L. Dawson, the Democratic Congressman Bill Lewis, and Boston. But all of this underscores the discrimination that still existed in the city. Store clerks, bus drivers, police officers, and firefighters, among other jobs, were highly restricted to white people, and schools were still desegregated. All of this led to the formation of the Chicago Freedom Movement in the 1960s, the giants from the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, translated really well into the new movement. Alldayerrydababy's Coordinating Council of Community Organization received support from Martin Luther King Jr.'s Southern Christian Leadership Conference, but open housing remained a divisive issue among the city's radically polarized population. Street crime remained a low priority for the police in the African American neighborhoods, leading to an increase in drugs, crime, poverty, and infant death rates. The deindustrialization in the 1970s did little to alleviate the situation, as jobs became even scarcer for the city's south side. Things continued to get progressively worse as the Reagan administration slashed social welfare programs in the 1980s. Decades of neglect resulted in a wave of political activism. Chicago elected its first black mayor, Harold Washington, in 1983. But the mayor could do little to assuage the situation in the city's decrepit neighborhoods and their fragile dynamics, as the predominantly white council opposed him on every count. In the 1990s, accusations of racial profiling and the declining black communities forced the city to take remedial actions. From there, $1.5 billion was allocated to remove 51 high-rise project
Relax,
buildings
kitty.
and replace them with mixed-income housing. For most, however, mixed-income housing was merely a euphemism for the removal of poor people. And it's here that I need to warn you, the next chapters of the story might be particularly upsetting, especially with the holidays upon us, as even in places like Chicago's O Block, family, tradition are the people's main priorities. Yet, seeing how things unfold in projects, especially during the holidays, might make you reflect upon the future and how important it is to take responsibility for the ones you love, and life insurance is the perfect place to start. Thanks to the sponsor of this video, Policy Genius, finding a solution won't be hard. As a father myself, I made sure to get reliable life insurance. If you'd like to do the same, Policy Genius is the perfect place to start. Their technology makes it easy to compare quotes from top insurers, so you'll always have the lowest price. In fact, with Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million in coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. And you can trust their guidance, as their licensed agents work for you, not the insurance companies. So it's no wonder they have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot. Your family deserves peace of mind. A life insurance policy, Policy Genius, can give it to them. So head to policygenius.com/itshistory, or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. Thank you to Policy Genius for supporting the channel, and now back to Chicago's O Block. All of this brings us to the Parkway apartment homes stretching from 63rd to 66th along King Drive and its problems in the 21st century. The O'Donnell homes, as they were originally called, occupy the boundaries of Woodlawn and Washington Park. Now, some people claim that the O Block is not as bad as the media makes it out to be. Other neighborhoods are statistically worse, but still, you have to contend with the fact that it is surrounded by most of those neighborhoods. West Woodlawn to its east, Washington Park to its north, and Inglewood on its west are all dangerous neighborhoods. And the Greater Grand Crossing that O Block belongs to does not have a great reputation. Violent crimes like murder or assault on females are almost 700% higher in Washington Park neighborhood than the national average. With 11 cases of assault, robbery, burglary, and stolen property laying in wait in areas of approximately 12,000 residents every day, this spot is often avoided. While Hyde Park to the east is fairly safe, West Woodlawn has high crime rates as well. It should be noted that some recent social programs like Project Hood have helped alleviate crime in the neighborhood. So does that make it safe, you ask? No. The crime rate is 1.7 times higher than the city on average. To the west, Inglewood's 26,000 locals experience violent crimes about 8 times more than the average for the city. In 2022, 2,837 or 100,000 people were assaulted, according to official figures. Moving by foot is highly discouraged in all of these areas, especially for female travelers at night. You might ask, but why is violence so rampant in these specific areas and not Chicago's entire Black Belt? The answer is fairly straightforward. The Black Belt has historically had rich zones and poor zones. The rich zones have fared relatively well, but some neighborhoods have been neglected. Discrimination, inadequate social structures, housing issues that made it hard to afford housing in other parts of the city, and some inept political ideas like middle-income housing have led to more problems than solutions. Gangs have become a staple of these neighborhoods, and rivalries between said gangs result in several casualties each year. The rising influence of gangs also means that they're at liberty to harass the locals. The Great Grand Passing was not immune to these historical changes and shortcomings. With 8,198 reported crimes per 100,000 people in 2021, it is one of the worst neighborhoods on the South Side. Regular police patrols have not been able to curb the crime. Every resident of its 32,000 population has a 1 in 13 chance of becoming the next crime victim. Little to no hotels in this neighborhood are recommended to any tourists. The Parkway Apartment Homes facility.
Okay, guys, 8 down, 5 up. Wish me luck. What? I can't move! You just took my move! You made me stand still! You piece of shit cocksucker developer! Suck my fucking dick, Epic! Fuck you and your fucking stupid developer ass! You took my movement away from me. I was like, I'm trying to move. I pressed the buttons. Nothing happened because you suck dick. As I came out of the fucking Silver Surfer board, I was completely robbed of all movement as you suck dick live in real time in my fucking stream, you piece of shit cocksucker developer. I said what happened. I didn't lie. Piece of shit ass developer robbed me of all movement, like in the top 5. In the top 5 in the match. He robbed me of all movement. He made me stand there while 3 people shot at me. Good kitty. I'm gonna get off this game. Good night, guys. I'm going to bed. Thank you for paying attention to me all day. I've been recording for a long time. I'm gonna stop now. And I'm gonna upload it to my channel. You've been watching Skycatlive. I'm a full-time Friday gamer all day, every day. You know, come click on the cast face to donate. Come to my Twitch, my YouTube. Give me a like, sub, or a follow. Thank you so much for your time, guys. I love you. And I'm going to stop here. And so there goes the video.